Thank you very much. Good afternoon to all of you, and many thanks for inviting us to present the work that at the European Investment Bank we are developing during the last years to support energy efficiency and renewable projects. I will start with a very brief introduction on the EIB, because most likely my colleague will also probably want to give a snapshot, and then I will immediately move into some examples of financing opportunities, how we can finance projects, and also about the ELENA facility, a technical assistance facility that is managed by the EIB on behalf of the European Commission. I will try to make it short, and so that we can have some time for questions at the end. So the European Investment Bank is based in Luxembourg, and it's owned by the 27 EU member states. So the EIB is the EU long-term lending institution, a public bank with objectives driven by the EU policy. So typically we help to finance the EU policies, let's say in this sense, because we are speaking about energy efficiency and renewables. Let's say that our activity is fully aligned with the EU priorities, and they largely take into account the EU directives and the EU regulations on energy efficiency and renewables. Our activity is mostly divided in 4 key areas: innovation, SMEs, infrastructure, and the 4th area on climate environment, where we include all the support to energy efficiency and renewable energy sources. Just for curiosity, the EIB finances itself mainly through the issuance of bonds. So typically the EIB raises money in the market capitals, and then with that money is in conditions to lend into the member states and also to some other countries outside the EU. And outside the EU, let's say our activity is ruled by the existence of mandates, which are also endorsed by the European Commission. Our core activities include lending, blending, and advisory. In terms of products, we can lend to counterparts to finance projects, and we have many different products. And then in terms of technical assistance, we also have several instruments with some differences, in order also to provide a kind of a suitable product to the different needs of the different stakeholders that we deal with. So in terms of financing, in 2021, the volume of lending of the EIB was roughly 95 billion euros. Here we can see, let's say, a very brief breakdown of the lending activities. And in the column in the middle, we only have, let's say, the breakdown of the lending of the EIB, while the 95 billion are the consolidated figures, which also include the European Investment Fund. In terms of climate bank objectives, the bank has the objective of unlock by 2030 roughly 1 trillion euros of investments. By 2025, 50% of our total financing should be related with climate action and environmental activities. And by 2020, that our activities and our lending activities are fully aligned with the Paris Agreement. So this is typically what we have. This is a snapshot of our lending volumes during the last roughly 10 years in the energy sector. And we can see that in 2012, renewables in blue and energy efficiency in green, they represented roughly 50% of the lending volumes of the energy sector, and that those volumes have been steadily increased, and now they represent probably roughly 2/3 of the lending activities in the energy sector. So we have seen a growing demand over the last years, both in energy efficiency and renewables. Renewables, okay, it probably started slightly earlier, but still remains with a strong pace. And energy efficiency, it has steadily increased. There was just a kind of a drawback in 2018, but if we look to the volumes in a long-term perspective, we see that there is a steady increase in the lending volumes and energy efficiency. If we just have a kind of a snapshot to the lending activities in terms of energy efficiency, we will see that most of the lending activities are related with energy efficiency projects in buildings. And then we also have some other energy efficiency projects in street lighting, district heating networks, some industrial processes in SMEs and so on. But let's say the majority, I think roughly two-thirds, 65% relate with the energy efficiency projects in buildings. These are the EIB objectives for 2022. Due to the, let's say, macroeconomic circumstances and to the events that we well known, probably these figures will be updated and will be changed. But we will see that we can see that the objective was to reach a lending volume of roughly 18 million euros for sustainable energy and natural resources related activities. In 2019, there was a significant change in the way we were lending in the energy sector, because the EIB energy lending policy was updated and reviewed and approved in the end of 2019, and with this we started the phasing out of lending to fossil fuel activities. Until then, we were still lending projects on natural gas. The phase out was with the phase out lending to natural gas was stopped, and we are currently just financing some projects that were already approved by the European Commission, and they were already in the pipeline. And with this change, our focus is now on energy efficiency and decarbonization of the energy sector, which of course also includes a strong commitment on supporting renewable energy projects. So typically we have these four main areas in the new EIB energy lending policy. The first one, unlocking energy efficiency. It's well known from all of us that unlocking investments in energy efficiency is always complicated. Sometimes we don't have the funds, sometimes we don't have the necessary know-how. So there are a couple of challenges in this topic, and we can also discuss this later on in the questions period. Second one, decarbonizing the energy supply, strong support to the implementation of renewables. A third objective of supporting innovative technologies and new types of energy infrastructures, also to support R&D projects. And a fourth, let's say, vector, a fourth objective, securing and enabling the infrastructure. Probably until 1.5 years ago, we were mostly focusing our activities, and I'm not exclusively speaking about the EIB, but speaking about the energy market, on energy efficiency and renewables, because we took the security of supply as something that was granted. And we see now with the conflict in Ukraine that there are significant disruptions in natural gas supply, and that this is also hugely impacting our daily activities and the economic development of the EU member states. Regarding this objective of unlocking energy efficiency, let's say our key priorities is to have energy efficiency as a first principle, as a way to promote competitiveness, help the climate, also reduce the energy dependence of the EU member states. In principle, all the energy efficiency activities are peri-aligned, just some very few exemptions. With this strong commitment from the EIB to support energy efficiency activities, we have increased the lending up to 75% of the eligible costs. Just as a brief note, typically the EIB finances up to 50% of the eligible project costs, but due to the urgency of moving forward with energy efficiency projects, with the approval of the energy lending policy in 2019, it was openly assumed that regarding energy efficiency projects, the EIB can finance up to 75% of the eligible costs, focus on building rehabilitation and SMEs, and then trying to develop a new set of products, trying to integrate some other projects that we already had in our portfolio to try to overcome the different barriers that public and private entities face when implementing energy efficiency activities. In terms of eligibility, let's say typically EIB finance projects need to comply with the applicable regulations. Typically, when we are speaking about projects inside the EU, they will need to comply with the European Performance of Buildings Directive. Typically, the energy savings should be estimated based on an energy audit or any other method which is considered as transparent and accepted by the EIB. We also finance new construction. They also have to have an additional motivation. We typically don't finance new construction for, let's say, a real estate project, but if we are speaking about social housing, those type of projects can also be financed by the EIB. Nevertheless, they will need to be more efficient than what is included in the national legislation. So currently, all the new buildings need to comply with the nearly zero energy building standards, and to be eligible for EIB financing, they need to be 10% more efficient than the applicable threshold in each one of the member states. And as I have also mentioned, we also finance projects in street lighting, industrial facilities, and SMEs, which are motivated by energy efficiency objectives. On renewables, let's say the story is slightly the same. Typically, we finance all low carbon technologies, typically PVs, wind turbines, any other technologies, green gases like hydrogen and so on. So all that is eligible for EIB financing. We can also finance up to 75% of the eligible costs for high policy value projects, and where EIB involvement accelerates project implementation. In this case, typically the projects need to be aligned and comply with the requirements imposed by the Renewables Directive 2. Technologies at the early stage of deployment can also be supported, and when we speak about low carbon gases, we are typically speaking about biomethane and green hydrogen. Just a very brief snapshot of what we have and what we are currently supporting in Romania on energy efficiency and renewables. On renewables, we don't have that many projects, but on energy efficiency, we have financed during the last 11, 12 years, roughly 12 projects in Bucharest for housing renovation. So for those of you who live in Bucharest or already know what we are doing, we have lent roughly 60 million euros for the renovation of approximately 160,000 apartments, and also a smaller part for the renovation of school buildings. So we have ongoing and completed operations with Bucharest Sector 1, Bucharest Sector 2, Sector 4, and Sector 6. And currently we have a new envelope, a new program loan to continue to support the renovation of multi-apartment buildings in Romania. So this new program loan is expected to be approved relatively soon, probably still during the next month or in November. And with that, we expect to be able to provide additional lending of 300 million euros for renovation of residential buildings and also public sector buildings all across the Romanian territory. Of course, that we are also open to support renewable projects, but of course we need to be approached by the promoters, which are also eager and willing to implement those type of projects. So in terms of financing the investments themselves, the EIB can finance energy efficiency and renewable projects in Romania, but sometimes the promoters, they struggle a little bit because either they don't have the technical knowledge to do that, or they need some type of additional support. One of the technical assistance facilities that the EIB is managing is the ELENA facility. So the ELENA facility was created in 2009 based on an agreement between the EIB and the European Commission. and is currently managed by the EIB. And the money that was used so far, we are still using money from Horizon 2020, and we also know that we will have additional funds from InvestEU to finance additional projects. The picture that you can see here is one multi-apartment building that was renovated in Bucharest. I don't exactly recall which was the sector, but is one of those projects. My apologies because I forgot to update these latest figures here, but I have them in one of the next slides. So with Elena, what we provide is a grant to public and private entities which need to implement energy efficiency or building integrated renewable. When we speak about building integrated, we typically speak about PVs in rooftops, biomass boilers, and similar projects like that. In terms of the grant covers up to 90% of the eligible costs. The budget allocation is on a first-come, first-served basis, and we have a budget of roughly 30 to 50 million euros per year to allocate to individual projects. Nevertheless, the project should already have a certain level of maturity. The promoter should know exactly what is the idea, what is the barrier, why he needs the Elena grant to move forward. And there is a performance obligation. There is a so-called leverage factor, and this leverage factor is 20 for sustainable energy projects and 10 for residential building and transport projects. So, for instance, if an entity asks for 2 million euros from the EIB to help to pay for the energy audits, feasibility studies that will lead to the renovation of public buildings and street lighting systems, in order to be able to receive the 90% grant, we'll need to have a multiplier of 20. So that means that to receive and to be able to receive 2 million euros to pay for all these studies, the investment at the end of the project needs to be at least 40 million euros. This for public sector projects. For residential and transport related projects, this leverage factor reduces to 10. So that means that if an entity is receiving the same 2 million euros to, let's say, support the implementation of a project to develop an electric tram line in one city in Romania, then that means that the investment at the end needs to be at least 20, while in the other case it was 40. If the leverage factor is not achieved, the money may be clawed back, and the investment needs to be mobilized either by the entity that is asking for the money or by any other entity which is supported with the Elena grant money. The timetable for implementation is typically 3 to 4 years, but most of the projects, they receive a small extension. As I have mentioned, we can support public sector entities or private sector entities which are on the way to implement energy efficiency projects. Of course, they need to justify why they need the Elena money, and the Elena money can be used to pay for technical studies, energy audits, business plans, and financial advisory, legal advice, preparation of the tender documents, to aggregate smaller projects for project management. And typically, this money can be used either to pay internal staff or external experts. So let's say the scope, the way how the technical assistance program is to be implemented, it's up to each one of the entities in accordance with their own needs. Sectors supported a little bit what I have already referred. Buildings, we support residential and non-residential, street lighting and traffic lighting related projects, building integrated renewables, district heating and or cooling projects, urban public transport, and smart grids. Let's say typically all these investments can be bundled in one single project, but then we need to assess what is the leverage factor. If we want to benefit from the leverage factor of 10, we need to have a project exclusively on non-residential buildings or on public transport. If we have in the same project all these investments together, most likely the leverage factor will go to 20. So far, we have supported 142 projects, roughly 66 completed projects and 76 ongoing projects. We have in our portfolio 2 projects in Romania. Here is just a snapshot of what we can support in the energy efficiency envelope, the one with a leverage factor of 20. Here we have some images of street lighting projects, district heating, and another project. I think the upper right picture, it's an Italian project on renovation of public buildings. Projects related with the renovation of residential buildings, and projects related with the promotion of clean and innovative transport system. So this is typically the application process. It starts with the first contact. Then we ask for a pre-application and 2-3 pages document, which is used to check the eligibility of the program. And then if this preliminary concept is eligible, then we will work together with the applicant to have a complete and an application that can be sent to the European Commission for approval. Once approved by the European Commission, the contract is signed, and then the applicant can start receiving the money and start implementing the project. Just about to say that roughly 95% of the projects that are submitted to the European Commission, they are approved. And this is a slightly different mindset. This is not the applications to Horizon 2020 calls that you are probably familiar with. We work together with you to have a project that can be considered as eligible by the European Commission. So here is how the leverage factor is calculated. We divide the eligible investments by the grant that was attributed, and then energy efficiency projects, they need to comply with a leverage factor of 20, transport and sustainable residential with a leverage factor of 10. So these are the main figures of the projects. 142 projects across Europe. We have until now disbursed / committed roughly 250 million euros of grants, which are expected to mobilize roughly 8 million euros of investments. In Romania, so far we have 2 projects. The first of them with Sector 6 of Bucharest municipality, where they typically ask for ELENA support to accelerate and to support them in the renovation of some educational buildings, and also in the construction of 8 new buildings compliant with the nearly zero energy standards. This, let's say, this type of support is no longer eligible because nowadays the nearly zero energy buildings are already mandatory in all member states. But at the time in which this project was approved, somewhere in 2017, 2018, it was not yet mandatory, and we could still support this type of projects. We have another ongoing project with the South Muntenia Regional Development Agency, which aims to provide support to public authorities which are aiming to renovate their public buildings, and also to install building integrated renewable energy, typically solar PV panels in the building rooftops. The investments are expected to be made in all 6 counties of South Muntenia region, and they typically what we anticipate is that about 100 public buildings will be renovated and will have PV panels installed. So South Muntenia will receive a maximum ELENA contribution of 2.1 million euros. The project has just started in 2022 and is expected to end in 2024. Many thanks for your attention. There are some additional information in the EIB website with a link that is provided, and I'm fully available to reply to any type of questions. Thank you very much.